If you find yourself being constantly interrupted at work while you're trying to get an important project done, or you're trying to tackle your long to-do list, I know it can feel frustrating and difficult to handle. And I just want to take a moment to reassure you that you are definitely not alone. I have a weekly email newsletter that I send out every Friday. And in one of the newsletters earlier this year, I asked everyone if they could reply to let me know what their biggest challenge was when it came to managing their time. Because I've been thinking about recording this episode for ages, and I wanted to make sure it would be as helpful as possible. And just to make sure I was focusing on the right things, the answer came back loud and clear. The biggest challenge by far was constant interruptions at work. One person even said that the nature of HR is, "Have you got a minute?" And I thought that summed it up perfectly. I can vividly remember being in my former HR roles and having a stream of people coming up to my desk to ask questions or sending me messages asking for help. And because a lot of the time we're in HR because we want to help people, we want to make sure they have a good experience at work, it can feel hard saying no. It's so easy to find that you start the day with the best of intentions to get an important piece of work done, but by the time you're logging off from your computer at the end of the day, that thing is still sitting on your to-do list because you were pulled away from working on it or distracted from working on it by the interruptions that happened. So, in this episode, I want to share a few things that I hope will really help to put boundaries in place that mean you'll still have time to answer queries and you'll still have time to support people at work who come to you for help. But you've also got protected key chunks of time for focused work where you aren't interrupted and distracted. If you're a regular listener or watcher of the show, thank you for being here. It's great to have you back again. And if you're new to HR Coffee Time, hello and welcome. I'm your host, Fay Wallis. I'm a career and leadership coach with a background in HR, and I specialise in supporting HR and people professionals to have successful and fulfilling careers through this HR Coffee Time podcast, through my Inspiring HR Leadership programme, and also through the Essential HR Planner. So let's dive into 4 practical tips to help stop you getting interrupted so often. You may, of course, already be using some of these tips, or it might be that you've heard of them before and thought, oh yes, I must give that a try, but maybe you've never quite got round to it. So it's my hope that by the end of this episode, you'll have at least one thing that you can put into action, that you decide you want to put into action, that's going to make a really big difference and helps you get through your most important work and your busy to-do list. So, tip number 1 is to reduce the number of interruptions by introducing set open door hours during the day or the week. These being set times that people are welcome to come to you with queries. If you do this, the challenge is going to be sticking to them. So you'll need to make sure that you communicate to everyone what these hours are and why you're putting them in place. You can have the information at the bottom of your email signature. If you have an on-site office, you can stick a sign up with information on the door. And again, you could put a sign by your desk if you wanted to. And one thing that can really help with this, if you find it hard to say no, even though you've told everyone and everyone knows about your open door policy, what can really help is to have some wording ready. And that wording is there ready for you to say when someone interrupts you. So instead of going to a default response of, oh yes, of course, I'll stop working right now, instead you have something like, I'd be really happy to help, but I'm in the middle of something right now. I can speak to you about this at 3 o'clock. Shall I put a time in the calendar for us to have a catch up then? Just having that little sentence, that little bit of wording ready to use can make a really big difference and help stop you from leaping in to help straight away and getting pulled away from the important work that you're doing. I really remember an engineer that I worked with, and he used to have a big red sign on his desk that had wording along the lines of, working on a critical project, please do not disturb between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. He was so good at holding his boundaries around this. We all knew that there was absolutely no point even trying to speak to him when the red sign was up. But we also knew that he would happily be interrupted the minute that it reached the time he said he'd be available on the sign. So I think there's a lot to learn from him, really. I think the fact that we knew he'd be fine with us going up to him later meant that you did still approach him and you didn't just think, oh, come on, can't you just fit me in for, I've got this quick question for you quickly. So that's tip number 1. While we move on to tip number 2, one thing I think I should point out that's really important is the fact that although this is something you personally might be finding difficult, having these constant interruptions, I can guarantee that there'll be lots of other people in the organisation you work for who will be finding it hard to get to their important work too. We've all worked with people who complain that they're in meetings all day and the only time they have to get any work done is the evening. Or we've also worked with people who say that as soon as they sit down to do something, they get interrupted, like you might be finding. One of the many brilliant things about working in HR is that hopefully you have got sway and influence over working practices throughout the whole organisation. So if you suggest implementing some company-wide initiatives to help stop interruptions and distractions, you won't just be helping yourself. You'll have a lot of very grateful and hugely relieved colleagues who are thrilled they have more time to focus on their important works and projects as well. There are such huge benefits to the organisation as a whole if everyone is less distracted and has more time for what Cal Newport calls deep work. In his hit book, which is also called Deep Work, he points out that it is this deep work, and just to explain what that is, so deep work is work where you can fully focus without distraction. It is the work that really moves things forward, whether that's things like strategy, problem solving, or creating something new. You need that focused time for it, and it can only happen if we're not being interrupted. We have that time to think. So as it's that type of work that is often going to make the biggest difference to an organisation, it's in the interest of everyone to create an environment where everyone who needs the opportunity to have periods of deep work can do that without being interrupted. I have seen in other organisations where they've put some brilliant initiatives in place to help people have time for focused work. As an example, Asana introduced No Meeting Wednesdays, and they did that more than a decade ago to give everyone time without distractions. It's not just about no one having meetings, it's also about not distracting each other and having focused time to get things done. Tip 3 is another idea that I was excited to see one of my coaching clients put into practice and have really big success with it after we talked about it in a coaching session. And this is to have working meetings. So meetings where the aim is to get work done instead of just talking about work, which is what normally happens in meetings. She arranges a time for her whole HR team to be in a meeting room together with their laptops. If you have a virtual team, you could easily arrange to do this virtually too on Teams or Zoom, or whichever conferencing tool it is that you use. She then explains that it's not a typical meeting. Instead, everyone's going to be using the time to actually get their work done. And then she goes around everyone in the room and asks them what they want to get done in that time. So everyone shares what it is that they want to work on. And then there's an agreement that they'll all just get their heads down and crack on with that work for the set amount of time that the meeting is taking place with. So the amount of time they've all got for it. Then at the end of that time slot, she then says, okay, everyone, how did we all get on? Goes around the room and checks in with everyone. There is something really powerful about accountability. If you say you're going to do something, so you tell someone you're going to do it, and you know they're going to check in on you a little bit later, it's so much more likely that you're going to get that work done. And also, if you're all physically at a location together, it's much less likely that you're going to have people turning up and distracting you. And to help you do really well at this, I would recommend shutting down all your notifications so that you can't just spot something flashing up on your phone or flashing up on your screen that could interrupt you and get you distracted again. And if this feels like familiar advice because you're a long-time listener to the show or because you have a copy of the Essential HR Planner and you come along to the free monthly planning sessions that I run for all Essential HR Planner owners, you'll know this is a technique that I personally use all the time, and I've just found it to be completely life-changing for getting stuff done. Because unless you've got people with you in that meeting room with you, whether that's an online one or an in-person one, it's easy to put slots in our calendar and say, oh yeah, in that slot in my calendar, I'll make sure I'm not distracted at all. But actually, that just doesn't happen. It's much harder to keep those firm boundaries if we haven't got accountability. So that's why I'm a really big fan of having these kind of working meetings, or they're also called co-working sessions, or some people call them body doubling as well, where you're both getting on with a similar task at the same time. Right, let's move on to tip 4. So tip 4 builds on the idea of actually physically taking yourself away from your regular desk or making yourself unavailable so that it's impossible for people to interrupt you and distract you. I've seen a couple of different HR directors that I've worked with in the past who have also been coaching clients who've decided to allocate Fridays as the day that they work from home. I mean, obviously they're lucky they can do this. I know not everyone gets control over the days that they can work from home, or they may not be able to work from home at all. But they both realised that Friday tends to be the quietest day in the office. They had found it was just really, really difficult to have focused time during the week where they were in senior level roles, which meant that they're often affected by the curse of regular meetings, which means they're in meetings all the time, back to back, or they're being interrupted while they're at their desks with urgent tasks. So what they both realised was, okay, it's just not going to work for me to be able to have much dedicated, uninterruptible time during Monday to Thursday when it's just completely busy all the time. But actually, on a Friday, I'm going to say to everyone, this is my work from home day. This is the day that I just do project work and focused work and deep work. I am completely available to you Monday to Thursday, but this day is blocked out for my deep thinking and my project work. And they block out the whole day in their calendar. And everyone knows that you can't book a meeting with them then. And it's just so much easier for them to do that, because for lots of people who work part-time, Fridays are often the day that they have off. For lots of people who don't work part-time, they feel like they're starting to wind down for the week on a Friday, which means it's far less likely they'll suddenly come to you with queries at that point that feel really urgent. There seems to be a real Friday mindset thing that people can often fall into. So it means that this can be the perfect time for you to crack on and get your work done distraction-free. That brings us to the end of the episode. As a quick reminder, we looked at 4 different tips to try to stop interruptions from derailing you at work. They were: tip number 1 was to set fixed open door hours that you clearly communicate. And you'll have to keep communicating it, by the way, so people know when they can come to you for help. Tip number 2 was to introduce a company-wide policy where everyone is expected to have focused time to work when no meetings or interruptions can take place. And it hasn't got to be a whole day like Asana have done. It could just be a set time, maybe an hour or 2, one day in the week. Tip number 3 was to start having working meetings as an HR team where you have dedicated time to all work on the big projects or the deep work that you need to focus on. And if you're in a standalone HR role, so you aren't part of a team, you can always partner up with someone else in the company who would really benefit from having some focused time as well, and then just do that with them or do it with their team. And then finally, tip number 4 was to consider having one day of the week, probably a Friday, to work from home and keep your calendar completely blocked out for your focused time. If you don't have that opportunity to work from home, or maybe you work from home all the time and it's actually quite difficult to think of physically putting yourself in a different place, you could book yourself a meeting room if you work in an office all the time, or if you always work remotely, it may be that one day of the week you want to take yourself off to a coffee shop or a co-working space and work from there. So it's just marking that day out in another way for you as feeling that little bit different and making it much more likely you're going to hold and keep that boundary. I really hope this episode has been helpful, and I would love to know if you decide to give any of the tips a try. You can always reach me on LinkedIn or through my website, brightskyhr.co.uk. It's always great to hear from you, so please do get in touch. And if you think other people might enjoy this episode and find it helpful too, I would be hugely grateful if you could help it to reach more people by either giving it a like if you're watching it on YouTube. It's always very exciting to see those likes, or by rating and reviewing the podcast if you're listening to it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Or if you're feeling extra generous, you could even post about HR Coffee Time on LinkedIn and recommend that other people give it a try too. If you do go ahead and do any of those things, please do let me know so I can say thank you. I truly appreciate your support, and I'm looking forward to being back again in 2 weeks' time with the next episode for you. Have a great couple of weeks in the meantime.